Ladies and gentlemen, hello. Good evening. I'll start the call meeting for November 30th of the Social Work Planning Commission meeting.
We do have a quorum present with,
One member of obfuscated and missing.
I will ask, we do have 4 public hearing items.
I'm going to ask for
An amendment to the agenda to move item 2 above item 1 to hear item 2 first. Will somebody give me a second or a motion and a second on that? Okay. I have a motion and a second to amend the agenda to hear item 2 before item 1. All those in favor, raise your hand. Thank you. So
Before we begin tonight, I do not have my rules in front of me for public hearing, but in general, how we operate this is we're here to hear the facts tonight. The Planning Commission is a recommending body. We're here to hear facts and opinions of the items before us. On each public hearing item, we will hold a public hearing. So how that works is the applicant will have a total of 10 minutes to give his or her presentation on each item. Once the applicant is finished with his or her presentation, any remaining time they have, that 10 minutes, they can stay for rebuttal. At the close of their public hearing, at the close of their presentation, we'll open up the floor to those who want to speak in favor of the request. There's a sign-up sheet that if you walked in, you can sign up and speak either for or against the requested items. You'll be called, you'll have a total of 10 minutes, not 10 minutes each. So if there's 3 speakers, you're not all going to get 10 minutes. Those those for the application complete their public hearing item, then we'll call those that would like to speak in opposition to the request. Likewise, they'll have a total of 10 minutes. Upon closing of the public hearing, if the applicant has any time for rebuttal, he or she can use that time at that moment to finish up his or her thoughts. At the close of the public hearing, the Planning Commission will go into deliberation. We may ask the applicant questions, we may not. At that point, we will make a recommendation to the mayor and council, which will hear these items. When, Barbara?
Sir,
Mayor?
December the 20th.
Okay, thank you. At this time, we'll introduce Barbara is a conditional use application. Cherokee, can you please introduce the item for us?
Yes, sir, Chairman. Good evening. We have an application for a conditional use under O&I zoning, that's office institutional. I do want to go back with a little background on this property. It used to be like 3 individual parcels back in the day, and the houses were torn down, burned by the Planning Commission. I mean, not the Planning Commission, sorry, the fire department. And they made this one parcel and zoned it O&I for office institutional. And in 2007, they had approved for this to have 50-something condos and retail on the bottom. The applicant is bringing this back before the Planning Commission and requesting a conditional use under the O&I due to the fact excuse me, that under the office institutional, it's required that you get a conditional use if you're going to have a restaurant or condominiums. I will point out under the O&I zoning, under permitted uses, number 15, it says small retail stores or office providing professional services with residential not to exceed 5 units per acre, loft or condominiums above. That is in the permitting uses or office institution. This property, we've labeled it as 586 North Cherokee, mainly because the corner house was 586 North Cherokee. And this is in the historic district. It is on the highway corridor district. Now, in addition to allowing dwelling single-family, limited upstairs loft-type units, the ordinance permits accessory parking garages and parking lots, accessory retail businesses, service establishment, banks, athletic clubs, churches, community centers, professional and business offices. Since we do have this on the highway corridor, we have a highway corridor ordinance that came in effect in 2008, mainly to guide how buildings looked in the corridor. Our highway corridor ordinance states that it will be brick or wood siding. These buildings that they're proposing will be brick, and the color palette would be historic colors. If a approved. The condos would be up top. They would be 1 and 2 bedrooms. We do have a kind of an outlay of the buildings of how they would look on the outside. This is the 2-story, not a 3-story. Originally, that's what they had approved, but these are 2 stories, mainly because the water, they wanted to make sure they had enough water pressure, and the chief has give us some comments on that. Will come later if this is approved with construction plans. But this would how it would look on the outside. This would be the corner where it's Annie P. Henderson and North Cherokee. This is the Annie P. Henderson elevation, that if you turn off North Cherokee down Annie P. Henderson, this is what you would see. And this is the North Cherokee side. You would see these at the road on the corner. The staff recommends that the Planning Commission consider approval of the request for the conditional use because condominiums can be permitted in O&I, and the applicant also intends for there to be a creation of a HOA to oversee the condos and the retail. They will all be in there together so they can make sure the retention pond and the common area is maintained. There will be small retail stores, offices providing professional services with residential, and our ordinance says not to exceed 5 units per acre on the condominiums as permitted uses. And then we're looking at just the conditional use at this point on this public hearing. We have several others to come after this, asking for different variances according to the ordinance.
Okay.
Do you have any questions?
Barbara, I do have a question.
Okay.
We're not considering a certificate of appropriateness as a corridor commission at this time. That will come at a later date, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So this is not the only time that this is approved, this conditional use permit is approved, this is not the only time we'll see this. We'll see this with the
We'll see a final.
in site plan when if it gets to that point. The other thing, Barbara, you pointed out, as a permitted use by right, they could build 5 units per acre of loft or condos above retail as a permitted use without a conditional use.
That is correct.
The purpose of the conditional use is because they want to build more than the stated density and the permitted use, correct?
That is correct. And they want to add a restaurant
Okay.
on the bottom.
Okay. Any other questions of Barbara of the application at this time?
Just for a matter of clarity for me, there is not a variance. Okay, so I have 2 copies of the condition. Oh, no, here it is. Variance request to allow more than permitted. It says retail units, but I'm assuming they mean residential units.
That's
So-
correct.
So there's a conditional use and a variance where they're asking for the same thing.
Well, they've got to have a conditional use if they build more than the units allowed in the permitted use.
So as a conditional use,
Because it's already allowed as a conditional use.
well, right, it's in order to exceed the 5 units per acre, this body can recommend a condition of conditional use not to exceed X number of units or X number of units per acre. Because they want to exceed that 5 units per acre, that is why they're asking for the conditional use. Looking at this on the surface, I don't think the variance to capacity is necessary because it's a conditional use in addition to condos over 5 units per acre, whatever it is you're receiving. So it seems to be a duplication of that.
Because it doesn't list the higher density
That just says,
in the condition.
that's correct. So, something that the staff report could have done is the state staff recommends approval with the condition units not to exceed 21 residential, or something like that. But nonetheless, it is established that by right, they can do 5 units per acre without coming before us for a conditional use, without going before the city council for a conditional use. They have the right to do 5 units per acre above retail, small retail store. So the conditional use being requested,
I'm seeing is,
for a restaurant is what I hear. Is that correct, Barbara?
That's correct.
And a conditional use to be able to exceed the 5 units per acre maximum. Is that correct?
Well, it's not really to exceed. Condominiums are under conditional use because it has requirements that you have to have under the condominiums. It does not, you can have loft living or condominium. We added, years ago, we added the condominium requirements because when you build condos, you've got to have a condo association. The Georgia Condominium Act states what you have to do, and you've got to set up a condominium, like a HOA.
Well,
You
they
have-
would have to do that even if they did the 5 units per acre.
That's right. They would still have to do that.
And nowhere in the conditional use does it say restaurant.
Not in our request, no. I think that was something added later. Is
Um,
that right?
It was like when the 21 units on top doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna have 21 retail on the bottom.
No, I understand.
You're gonna have some different square footages to make
Yeah,
it.
but nowhere in the application we see mentions requesting a restaurant. Is it?
No, it does not. Residential lofts above commercial space
Yeah.
as property is already zoned O&I, yeah.
So really, we don't have to vote on conditional use because in this, none of it's written that would ask for anything different.
I think at this point, Barbara, was the conditional use, how was that advertised for this request? Advertised to include the restaurant or just include?
Just for a conditional use. Conditional uses, these are the things that are required to have a conditional use. So I advertised it to be voted on to approve a conditional use. They could do either one of these. They could do the restaurant, they could do a printing company.
A conditional use is specific to those uses. Of
Well, they are,
You'd
but,
have to identify a request for a conditional use for a hotel.
right.
Not, oh, I've got a conditional use and today I'm gonna do a hotel. Well, no, I'm gonna do a printing and photograph and grading, so if
Gotcha.
it's a use-specific requirement.
Okay.
Um,
We were just trying to make sure what the spaces might be used for underneath the condos, because they're not gonna be 21 per se.
No, right.
No,
Right.
I understand.
Right.
There's not 21 retail.
But the.
No.
But for the.
But no.
The way, yeah,
So I mean, as written, their application.
I mean, we can-
Needs some conditional use.
Well,
It's
and
just a variance
Well-
within the conditional use.
you can make a recommendation on the conditional use that if they want to have a restaurant or not have a restaurant or not have anything but a restaurant.
and that's, since the application doesn't state exactly what the request is, what the conditional use request is, and since it wasn't advertised what it was for, yes, we can make a recommendation to approve a conditional use to only allow condo. We can make a condition that says only condominiums with X, can't exceed X number of units. We can include, the applicant, I believe, is requesting also to have the opportunity to do a restaurant. We can include that as part of that. That way, the approval is conditioned, again, conditional use, conditioned to those specific uses.
Okay. Here's mine.
Okay. No other questions? Ms. Sarver?
Good evening. I appreciate the opportunity to come back before y'all, Scott, and we're still excited about this project. We are requesting the variance of the 2 units per acre, which would put us at 21 versus 15 residential lofts.
Ms. Sarver? let's
I'm
don't
sorry.
talk about- Let's don't talk about the variances you're requesting. Let's
Oh,
talk about the conditional
excuse me,
use.
the conditional
Let's
use.
talk about the conditional use first, and then we can.
Yes, sir.
address those other ones on those other parts.
I apologize. It's all together, it's been
Yeah.
confusing
I understand.
for everybody. But we're here requesting a conditional use for 21 residential lofts And pretty much everything that Barbara stated, the HOA, all that will be in order. There still has to come before the plans and the additional things to sign off. This is just our initial request for conditional use for the board, if they're willing to allow us to do 21 residential lofts.
Ms. Sarver, can you, we start talking about a restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
What are the identified uses that you would like to also ask for? As a conditional use, we've got 7 uses that are potential in the O&I district. That's a curio souvenir shop, group or congregate personal care home, hotels, printing and photograph engraving, restaurant, tourist home, bed and breakfast, and a condominium. So we understand condominiums and we understand restaurant.
Right. Well, we will have on that main floor, we'll have offices. We do have a restaurant that's a seafood restaurant, steak seafood, that's comparable, a little bit more upscale than the Chop House in Madison. And we would like the opportunity to do that. If it's your wishes that we not, but we think it would be a great addition to the community if we could be allowed a conditional use to do a restaurant. And also for the neighborhood.
Yes, so offices are allowed by right.
Yes, sir.
So that's not a conditional use.
The only conditional use would be if the board will be willing to allow us to do a restaurant.
Sure.
I know.
Is there anything else you'd like to add about the conditional use at this time?
No, that's it. Thank you.
You have 9 minutes remaining. All right, so we'll call on those that would like to speak in favor of this request. We have Tom Brown.
Good evening, it's Tom Brown, 169 North Dogwood Avenue. I may be getting up a couple of times. Some folks call me about pluses and minuses, so I'm kind of speak for the whole list. I'm in favor of a conditional use as stated and as presented. I think lofts and retail would be good for the community. So the conditional use, I have no problem with that.
Anything else, sir?
In favor?
The public hearing right now is just for the conditional use.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Amani?
Chairman, I believe Amani is the applicant's designer, and he's here to answer any questions you may have.
So, sir, you don't wish to speak in favor of this request, just here to answer questions, is that correct? Thank you. At this time, we'll hear from people who would like to speak in opposition. Mr. Tom Brown. Conditional use.
Sorry. It's me again, 169 North Dogwood Avenue. I signed up for pro and con because among all of the public hearings,
Yes, sir.
I'm trying to cover a list of other people too. The conditional use, I'm in favor of. I did not get other comments they asked me to make about a problem with conditional use, as long as it's what we're talking about tonight.
Okay, Mr. Brown, just for the record, is there a group of people you're representing that have concerns or?
The Preservation Society,
Okay.
a couple of them called, and I told them I'm going to be here anyway. I would be glad to hear their comments. Otherwise, they wouldn't be known. So, yeah, I'm seeking for me and for a couple of other folks.
Okay.
Yeah. All right.
The next speaker, we have Rick Henderson speaking in opposition.
I am Rick Henderson of 170 Park Place Trail, Town Park. Biggest thing is, that's a lot put on and not that much answered, As far as parking, where would parking, how would it be devised as far as commercial parking, residential parking, what would the parking look like? And, because like that happened on Covington Square, when they had those, like townhouses. And then they actually did the covered parking and arranged it pretty good because it was already set up for commercial parking, that type, so it went well. And that's the biggest things. I had questions about the parking, what's it gonna look like from the street, and then what's it gonna look like from the parking in back? What about traffic issues? That's the biggest thing my concern was, because a lot of times when I'm coming out of Town Park there, it takes me a while if I want to turn left instead of right, So what, are there going to be any improvements as far as traffic? And those are just basic things. And the condos is fine with me, I've lived in them myself, but that was the concerns.
And the applicant does have time for rebuttal, so she may be able to address some of those.
Okay, thank you.
Next speaker is Christian or Stacy Lawrence.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Christian Lawrence. I live at 662 North Cherokee Road, so right next to the, future construction here. Our main concern is we bought a house knowing where we were, O&I area, and we understand that. Our biggest concern is with more of the buffering. I mean, if you approve a restaurant, something like this, I think is going to need it. Am I in favor of it and smelling it all the time? Probably not. But, the buffer is our concern. If we're going from 100 feet to 60 feet, it does move all that closer to us. So, how are we going to manage the runoff, the water runoff and all that? And how's that going to impact our property? So that's, that's really the main issue we have. Because again, we understand something like this is already in the plans and approved. So I think the density thing is a little bit much for this property. I had a property in Avondale Estates, and it was supposed to be all condos and it became apartments. So that's, if we pass condos, I hope we keep it condos versus, somebody that's buying in and wanting to be in the community. So that's all I have, really. Thank you.
Would you, sir, would you mind telling me your name one more time?
Christian Lawrence.
Lawrence. Thank you.
Thank you.
Matt Bray? Okay. So no other speakers signed up for against. Ms. Sarlo, you did have 9 minutes remaining if you would like to come up and.
Thank you. I did want to address Mr. Henderson's comment in regarding the parking. Actually, on this particular parcel and design, we have, it doesn't show here, but we have approximately 152 to 158 parking spaces. I think that's more than the city of Covington has around their actual square. So right here, if you'll notice, would be the private parking for the condos, and this will be gated. In addition, we have elevators to the second floor residences. So
Ms. Sarr, can you point your
Yes.
conversation to us, please?
Okay, right here.
Yes, ma'am.
As you'll see, this is gated.
Yes, ma'am.
So this here is the private parking for the residents. This here, we have 150-something parking spaces because per code, you're required to address that in order to have the O&I. Here we have the opening, which will help on foot traffic versus people having to go all the way around the building. So we also allow here for golf cart parking because as the city knows, they have just passed where you can actually ride your golf carts down to Freshway. So this will just be a little bit more opportunity for the homeowners and surrounding community. Let's see, as far as the neighborhood and the adjacent neighbor, we are required to have the buffer, and anything concerning the drainage, underground pond, things like that will all be with the design that will have to go through the city engineer and the engineer on record for the project. So any of those questions will certainly, address throughout the process. Once again, this is just the conditional use allowing us to have the condo, and we will, the number of units for the condo, as well as the possibility of the restaurant, which would be on the corner here, this side here. So, okay?
Ms. Sarlo.
Yes, sir?
thank you for addressing that. You mentioned underground detention, so that is part of the project plan. is
Yes, sir.
Underground detention
Uh-huh.
to handle the stormwater runoff generated.
Yes,
from the
sir.
site. So
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's good.
The other question or concern,
I heard was about the architecture. We saw the elevations, the renderings from Cherokee and Andy B. Henderson. What about the rear from the parking lot, looking at the buildings? Are they going to have a similar facade?
They will be, exactly. I believe it shows that.
Okay.
Let's see the back part. I don't know if it shows
Maybe I
that.
missed that, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so it will be,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, that's the back part. It'll come all the way around. So
Okay. So, and it- yeah.
I think it'll be aesthetically pleasing to the community as well, so.
Looking at this, again,
should everything go well tonight?
and city
So
council
the next step is,
going through the COA, kind of getting your site plan laid out a little more firm and before you get your engineering set of plans done. What improvements to the right of way, any kind of street improvements to anticipate the traffic, anything like that being discussed with you and the city? Anything like that to alleviate maybe some of the concerns?
I see that the main point of access will be on Andy P, probably due to the radius coming in off Cherokee. Any thoughts about lining up that driveway off Cherokee, maybe pulling the buildings further apart, doing away with the row of parking on the far side of the building, and having a kind of a main drive coming in, lining up with the driveway across the street, accessing around the back of the building that way? Is there?
Well, I don't think, well, to answer your questions, this is kind of the first step. This is by no means
Yes,
the
ma'am.
end of this project at all. And that is something that will be to the engineers and the
Excellent.
city in order to address any problems or concerns they have.
Okay.
You know, not short down the way, Brookstone Place, which was O&I as well, which is a nice office park. We did that project as well. So, you know, we will certainly address any concerns at that time, and I'm sure that they'll have them and questions for
Okay,
that.
and I just want to make sure that you are open to that. It's not going to catch you off guard if it comes back and you have to do a decel lane, or that radius coming in off Cherokee is not.
You know, I'll leave that to the engineers, the professionals. I was caught off guard when this project was brought and the city approved it for 70-something units. And then now we've scaled back. And when we came last time, we asked for 44. And we're definitely still excited about the project. Projects like this are costly. But I think that the city's ready for the residential lofts, and it'll be a nice added feature for young couples. We have a couple people already that want to purchase. So, but we'll address anything that the city has concerns about.
So, before you step away, were you aware of the additional conditional use permit criteria in our ordinance? Because I didn't see in your application how you've addressed those criteria.
As far as well, to be honest with you, we submitted 3 times, and then the paper, I think, confused it twice is the reason for this called meeting, and I appreciate y'all coming out this evening for that. I mean, simply, I want everybody to understand the property is already zoned. We just want the blessing of the city in order to, have a 2-unit per acre and added 6 units to make the project from the top and the bottom aesthetically pleasing, and
So what I was getting at is that within the ordinance itself, and this comes straight out of section 1501,
Subsection 4 says,
conditional use permit criteria. No application for conditional use permit shall be granted by the mayor and council unless it is determined that in addition to meeting the requirements contained within the applicable use standards in the zoning district in which the conditional use permit is located, satisfactory provisions and arrangements have been made concerning each of the following factors, all of which are applicable to each application. It says A, adequacy of the size of the site for the use contemplated and whether adequate land area is available for the proposed conditional use. B, compatibility with adjacent properties and with other properties in the same zoning district. C, adequacy of the public street on which the use is proposed to be located and whether or not there is sufficient traffic carrying capacity
for the use proposed. D, ingress and egress to the subject property and all proposed buildings, structures, and uses thereon
with particular reference to pedestrian and automotive safety and convenience, traffic flow and control, and access in the event of fire or other emergency. E, whether the proposed use will create
unreasonable adverse
impacts
upon any
adjoining land use by reason of
noise,
smoke, odor, dust, or vibrations generated by the proposed use. F, whether the proposed use will create adverse impacts upon any adjoining land by reason of hours of operation of the proposed conditional use. G, whether the proposed use will create unreasonable adverse impacts upon any adjoining land by reason of the manner of operation of the proposed use. H, whether there is adequate provisions of refuse and service areas. I, whether the length of time for which the conditional use permit is granted should be limited in duration. J, whether the size, scale, massing of the proposed buildings are appropriate in relation to the size of the subject property and in relation to the size, scale, and massing of adjacent and nearby lots and buildings. K, whether the proposed plan will adversely affect historic buildings, sites, districts, or archaeological resources. And L, whether the proposed plan will have an unreasonable adverse impact on natural resources or environmentally sensitive areas, including floodplains, wetlands, prime plant, or mineral habitat, or
other similar features of unique value to the character of the city. So that,
those are the criteria which any conditional use that comes before us, we have to weigh, and any conditional use that goes before the mayor and council, they have to weigh the impacts of those criteria. And that's what I was asking.
I understand,
At
I
any
understand,
time, Did you
and-
see those? Was that explained to you? Did you have opportunity to address that?
I understand. I know initially when we turned in the first one, we did answer the specific questions on that. I don't know if that overflowed to y'all of the initial questions that we answered, but that was done the first time. This is the third time that we've come back and tried to prepare something. I know there is no perfect piece of property, and all of them aren't going to fit what the conditional uses are that you know, you read off, and I guess, you know, this board has to determine, is this something that you want for your city or not? You know, will you be willing to allow the 6 additional and the conditional use of the restaurant? So,
Sure. And that's, it helps us.
us, if those, you know, any applicant, and I stress this to any applicant, in your own words, address those criteria and how your application or your request is not detrimental to those criteria or is met by those criteria.
I don't feel
but-
that it is, Scott, but then again, everybody has their difference of opinion. So that's why you're a chosen board, and you're here, and the body here, you know, the citizens are here. And so we're just trying to do something that's benefits the community. As I stated initially when I came before y'all, this will be the 4th development that I've done in the city. I love it that it's local, that somebody here that cares about the community, that's here to stay, that's not just going to do it and leave. And, you know, I think that says the fact that when it was initially 50, 60 units that were approved back in '07 and '08, and then now it's dropped back. You know, we haven't walked away from the project. And we will have a project here. I just hope that it has the blessing of the council. Okay?
Thank you.
What,
Yes, sir?
it says 150 parking spaces there.
I think there's approximately 100 and, what,
158.
58, 158, yes, sir.
Has anybody done a traffic study on this yet?
That's part of, like I said in the beginning, this is a conditional use. This is not by no means over with yet. We have several more, I hate to say, but hoops and processes to jump through. So,
Okay.
and we did initially, but like I said, in '07, '08, this, you know, things have changed, so.
Oh, yeah. I wasn't here on Sunday.
Also, what's the, well, I guess the end game as far as asking for the extra 6 units, is it 6 units, is that for a cost benefit situation? on the
Not a
property, or is it
cost
just because of
benefit, a
the
cost
layout?
that makes sense in laying out the property, because now we were trying to hopefully keep the 1-bedroom within 269, 289, you know, for young couples, you know, elderly. We have a lot of people that are interested in purchasing for that, but we're probably looking on up at the 300 mark now, so, with 21 units, so. The underground detention pond's roughly a couple $100,000. I mean, it's not cheap to develop or build, but
It's just a big, I mean, same thing.
Yeah.
What Mike has said is that it's the concern of the traffic flow and the density aspect. that
well, the only
we're looking at here, because I mean, that's part of the reason why we have the 5 units per acre is to make sure we control that density aspect. And this is on a busy street with, a lot of traffic coming in and out across it, down through it and by, it's a lot. So
well,
that's why
from a resident standpoint, right. From a resident standpoint, we're asking for 6 more vehicles, versus, and I personally, I don't think that's as much as an impact, but that's entirely, your opinion, and that's why they do. Yes, ma'am?
Are you guys familiar with the fact that the school comes up by there also?
Ma'am, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I did the office, O&I down the street, the Brookstone Place. And I also did Laurel Oaks over by the school, the high school. And so I'm very familiar with the city, yes. I'm not sure at what point the plans are, if they'll move the school. I know I did hear kind of that they're in the process of doing that, maybe moving it over toward the high school. But I'm sure, that may be a little ways out. But we'll address the traffic situations, with the city, most definitely.
Anybody else have any questions of Ms. Charlotte?
Okay, thank you.
Time to deliberate, your thoughts, concerns, questions, don't want to lay a motion.
So as far as just having lots of direction, I don't think it's an issue with the density issues.
Well, and we have a big list to look at that. So
I just don't want to make it a condition.
I'm going to make a motion. I am going to motion that we approve the conditional use with the 5 units per acre, but include a restaurant. At this time. I'm going to make the motion that we approve the conditional use, but limit to 5 units per acre, and approve the restaurant.
So,
Address the variance request.
We have a motion to approve the conditional use, condition to 5 residential units per acre, and to allow a restaurant and a second. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Motion passed unanimously. The next item, is we're going to go back to item number 1.
Wait a minute, let's go back, Mike, you did.
No. Oh, I'm sorry. I saw your arm, so, all right. So, all those for recount in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. All those opposed to the motion. Okay, thank you. I apologize, Mike. I saw your arm there. Should have hit me next time. The next item is a variance request at 586 North Cherokee Road. This says for 21 units, ordinance states 15 units, retail and condominiums. Barbara, would you like to introduce this for us?
Yes, sir. Under our O&I zoning, it does state in permitted use that you can actually have, it's not to exceed 5 units per acre, loft or condominium above. But if you go under the conditional use with the condominiums, it does not state a specific amount under the conditional use, but it does state it in the permitted use. So the applicant is asking to have 21 units, and that means 7 units per acre instead of 5 units per acre. And the small retail stores or offices providing professional services with residential on top, but they are asking a variance for that. And the staff recommends Planning Commission corridor consider approval of the variance request. The applicant has made repeated efforts to conform their project as closely as possible to this ordinance. These 1 and 2 bedroom condos will be marketed to a professional demographic, meaning those individuals who are not interested in purchasing traditional single-family homes. In addition, the applicant intends for there to be a creation of a HOA to oversee the condos. That's all I got.
Any questions for Barbara? Not? Ms. Sarah, would you like to come up and give your presentation on the variance being requested?
Okay, my name's Dana Sorrow again, and basically, as Barbara stated, we're asking for the variance for 21 units, whereas, 21 condominium units lots above the retail, and the ordinance states 15, so we were asking for a variance to allow us to have 2 additional per acre, which would be 7 per acre versus 55. That's it. Thank you.
Mr. Brown, you signed up to speak in favor. Is this for the variance?
I'm going to be opposed.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So all those that have been signed up to speak in for, that's concluded. Those who'd like to speak in opposition of the variance request, Mr. Brown?
Thank you. I will say that that property is a prime location for development and should be developed at some time. The density per acre is there for a reason. If you exceed that density in combination with retail, then the parking that's going to be required and the traffic flow that's going to be, will happen because of that, is what's straining those 3 acres, asking for variances on a lot of things around the property. So I know I'm getting into maybe another item, but it's pushing the envelope on what that property can sustain if you're doing over 5 units an acre and retail combined. That's a strain on that property. So I would be opposed to that.
Thank you. Mr. Henderson, do you have a comment on the variance request to increase the number of units?
I'm Rick Henderson. The biggest thing is, getting so much in a small space and the additional traffic it's going to cause is my biggest concern, and ones that's been voiced to me about the traffic on those. So, basically, when is that going to be addressed as far as, coming down 11, coming down? Is there going to be another access or excess on that allowed?
I'll try to answer that. I'm not going to speak for the applicant by any means, but at this stage, it's a concept. If it's approved, then they have to start their engineering work.
Okay.
That the applicant will submit plans prepared by a civil design engineer. Those plans are reviewed by the city, and the city has an engineer that they contract with to review plans that look at traffic, that look at stormwater, things of that nature, to ensure that it's not a backup. It will be required a traffic study to look at the trips per day coming out of residential and the retail. Traffic study may determine that no road improvements are necessary. It may say that a center turn lane is required. I don't know, but some of those questions would be answered at a later time, and we don't have the information tonight to answer that. And I don't think the applicant is prepared to have that discussion either, from what I heard in the last hearing. This is still very preliminary.
Thank you.
I don't know if that helps you.
Well, yeah. I'm just like want to get more information, try to put it, all together in my head.
We're all the same way. We like to know these things as well, but they have to get the approval first. Once they know they have the approval, then they can go hire the engineer and do that type of work.
Thank you.
Christian or Stacy Lawrence?
Good evening. I'm Stacy Lawrence, 662 North Cherokee. As my husband stated, we do live right next door to this property, and we have and he have very similar concerns to Mr. Brown and Mr. Henderson, and we know that there will need to be a traffic study to determine, traffic flow and what that will require. But the more units you put, the more cars, the more traffic, visitors, guests, things like that. It's a very small space to be putting a lot on that space. And so we're really concerned. I know in the mornings, taking my children to school just to turn out of my driveway, we have to plan and leave early. So I understand that a traffic study will come later, but just in general, it's a very small space to be putting so much on. So I just wanted to state our concerns that the 158 parking spaces is a lot of parking spaces, and the more condos that you add to that, the more guests, the more, and you can't just say one car per unit. It could be up to 2 or maybe even 3 cars per unit, and that's a lot of traffic coming in and out of that space.
Matthew Bray.
My name is Matthew Bray. I live on Hancock Drive, just slightly outside. Just a couple very brief points. I'm disturbed to see some of the variances that have been granted recently. It has nothing to do with this. But I'm wondering why we're not adhering to the code. And relating to this variance that's being requested, it would be section 1501.1 subpoint I. It says that you're not allowed to change the density of a use allowed by the zoning ordinance. I think we should adhere to the ordinances that are on the books. If they need to be changed, then that can be addressed how they need to be. Thank you.
Ms. Sorrow, you did have 9 minutes and 30 seconds remaining for rebuttal. If you'd like to take that and opportunity to maybe answer some of those questions or address anything else you'd like to address regarding the variances.
I know they touched on a couple of things, the neighbor buffer, things like that, but we, once again, as was stated, will have to follow any type of requirements request and regarding the traffic study. Any reduction of uses will reduce the parking spaces too. I want them to understand that as well. So we do feel like we have adequate parking for this site. And I guess we'll just address the buffer and all on the other end. But like I said, we feel like this is a strong thing for the community. And we feel like it'll be a addition to the community versus one building, Fred's or something like that dries up again. We want people to come to the city, have an opportunity, and have a place for a business and possibly live in a loft. So we'll leave it up to you guys.
Okay. So as Mr. Bray pointed out,
there's several sections in our ordinance that state what variances are and are not allowed. And furthermore, in section 1502, it says no variance may be granted for a condition of zoning required by the mayor and council in approving a rezoning application of use of land or building or structure that is prohibited by this ordinance or permitted use which would result in a greater density of development on a property than would otherwise be allowed without a variance. Furthermore, section 501 of the ordinance says no building or structure shall herefore be constructed or altered, 1, to exceed the height limit, 2, to have greater density per acre or occupy a smaller lot than required here under, and 3, have narrower or smaller front or rear side yards than set what you're in. In addition to the section 1501.1 that the Mr. Bray spoke about. So
getting a request to increase the density, I think, was not wise. I think yes,
The density could be increased, but not through a variance. The density would be increased through a condition of the conditional use. I don't see how this body can go against the ordinance in 3 specific sections that says a variance can't be granted to increase the density. That's my thoughts.
I would tend to agree. We already, this is addressed in not only the density set forth, but also an item which says you can change the density.
I'd like to make a motion to deny the request to increase the units to 2 per acre.
We have a motion to deny the variance request.
To increase the units to 21 from the 15 allowed.
And a second. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Next item is item number 3, a request for 50% of the front building line setback. Looks like it's a reduction by 50% of the front building setback line from 100 foot to 50 foot. And this is at 586 North Cherokee. Barbara, would you introduce this for us?
Excuse me, yes, sir. The applicant has requested a variance on the front setback. Under the office institutional zoning, under the regular O&I, the setback on a main road is 50 feet. But under the highway corridor ordinance, it's 100 feet setback. So they have requested to move this back to the normal setback of an O&I if it was not on the highway corridor. But this is on the highway corridor. So the applicant and property owner plan to build the retail office space on the ground floor, and they had requested 21 condos on the second floor. They're requesting a variance to reduce the front building line setback from 100 to 50 feet. Now, under section 706B of our highway corridor ordinance setback, it states historic, commercial, and institutional properties have very defined setbacks, and a few properties deviate from this established facade line. Properties that deviate distract from the streetscape, so new construction and redevelopment should closely adhere to the established facade line. Although the setback may be the same as in the historic area, similar setbacks create the desired streetscape, such as that's found in our historic district. The ordinance also states for commercial zone properties that less than 3 acres shall follow a front setback of 75 feet. So in one section it says 100, but in our properties that have less than 3 acres, which this has more than 3 acres, so it's the 100-foot setback. But they are requesting a variance to have 50. Staff recommends Planning Commission consider approval of the variance request. This would have our streetscape. If you would look where the sidewalk, they do have to go outside the right-of-way. So on the Highway 11, it says the right-of-way varies, so we would have to know exactly what the right-of-way is at that point of that property, and that is determined by a survey. And then from the setback, or the right-of-way setback, then they ask to go 50 feet for where they would start the building itself, instead of 100 feet. So in the efforts to conform this project closely to follow our ordinance, where the 1 and 2 bedroom condos will be marketed to, like I said, the professional individuals, and they will have the HOA set up to maintain the front, the sidewalk, that will be part of that common area that they would maintain this right in front of their buildings.
Barbara, did staff change their recommendation?
Sir?
Did staff change the recommendation since we received this information from denial to approval?
Yes, we did. We looked at it more closely. We had said, you know, if we denied this, then it went back 100 feet instead of 50 feet. But if you're looking at how the houses sit on North Cherokee, they're close to the road. There are a few, I know the Lawrences, they set back off the road a little bit more than the normal buildings.
What's the residential requirement?
50 feet.
Okay.
Oh, residential? Oh, it depends,
we're-
it depends on what it's zoned. This is O and I. So it's, the normal O and I is 50 feet. But because it's on the highway corridor,
Right.
it requires 100 feet
Right.
setback. But now, if you're next door and that property next door is zoned R25,
I get that.
then it's a different setback.
So is it on those, is it because you're looking at it from just generically looking down the road, you're looking at those buildings, or is it because you're looking at it based on comparative zoning areas of the same properties and lot sizes?
You're having to look at the various zoning and the
Right.
lot
So I mean, are we
sizes.
looking at other OI zone properties and their lot sizes to see if they're staying consistent with what we already have in place?
Well, all the O and I zoning, if it's not on the highway corridor, is 50 feet.
Okay.
But if it's on the highway corridor, the setback is 100 feet.
Problem with that is that nobody knows where the city right away.
This, well, like I said, you've got to have the survey to know exactly. Now, like right in front of City Hall here, it's 80 feet. If you get up toward where the Piedmont office is, because their survey, it's only 50 feet right away.
Who's responsible for the city?
The applicant will be responsible for the survey, not the city.
Is that come down the road, or, I mean, we're going to vote on something that we really don't know what's going on with?
Yeah, that's true, because it could be, like I said, it could be 80 feet, it could be 50 feet, but it changes. It's never the same in front of every property, and you can't say North Cherokee is 80 feet up and down the whole thing. The minimum that we have is 50.
We really need to know, looking at this, where the right of way is, where's the end?
Well, we do know the minimum right-of-way that we have found with different properties up and down the highway, it's 50 feet. So in the middle of the road, you got to go back 25 feet, and then she's got to go another 50 or 100, whichever you decide. And the building, if I'm not mistaken, the building on this plan from the actual property line is showing 56 feet to the building on that drawing.
Is that from the edge of the road?
Mm-hmm, be the blue line where they've got this.
This,
That's apparently the property.
Mouse. Okay, right in here where the golf parking,
Yes,
the
ma'am.
blue line to the corner of this building here is 56 feet.
But if the right of way cuts into that, it would have to come back.
It'd have to move back, yeah, it would have to. Like I said, you know, on this concept, it was, you know, it varies on Highway 11, so we've got to have the survey to know exactly what the right-of-way is. And that's going to come out with the traffic study and the road actually, you know. She's,
So should we wait until we get there?
probably behooved the applicant, but it's before us tonight. I mean, we can hold the public hearing and we can table it.
We ain't got that far yet.
No, sir.
I'm sorry.
That is quite all right.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's something we could look at is,
Table that, so we get a better understanding.
well, let's,
Yep, so for the public hearing, Ms. Sarr, would you maybe come up and discuss the variance request to reduce the front setback? Maybe you have a better understanding of the parking line, maybe what comes out.
The blue line here along here is the actual survey line that's shown on what you have. This actually comes back another so many feet.
Okay.
From here to there is 56.8. The whole purpose of that, and it was working with the city when we went back to the drawing about 3 times, because they stressed and everybody stressed they want it to be an aesthetically pleasing coming down the highway. Of course, survey, Mr. Criswell, sidewalks and all that is on us as the development, which will have sidewalks all the way down the highway and down Annie P. Henderson as well. But once again, the whole purpose of that and requesting the variance was to keep a consistency with several of the properties that are down through there, but also just to make it look more of a, you know, you're coming through the city and to make it aesthetically pleasing. So basically, it's a difference of about 42 feet. And like she said, the O&I does require 50 feet because if you go further down to Brookstone, you've got the front building and the building on the left is, I don't think that's but about what, 50 or 75 feet. And so, but because this is on the highway corridor, it was a little bit confusing, so. But I do know the city's working on their ordinances and to get a little bit more consistency.
So it looks like the property line comes in on your property from the edge of the pavement, or where you're behind the sidewalk, it looks like it comes in maybe 15 feet over there on the northernmost section. There's not a scale on the site plan I have here.
Right. I think Kamani, the sidewalk is within the right-of-way as normally, correct, Barbara? Yes. And then after that is, behind there is the 56.8. So maybe he can,
Are you asking about that?
Yeah, is that about 15 feet?
No, it's about 7.
And that's a property line that
Yeah,
bumps
this is
in there?
this is the property line. Since these were 3 lots.
I understand, but the
One-
property line actually comes down 7 feet and continues
Yes.
on?
Yes.
And that's what gives
And that's
the
what-
greater right of way. So it may be, right of way maybe 50 feet, then it's variable, and that's what the survey will show, is the variation.
Yeah. And typically, when you have a development like this, we end up having the sidewalk and then making the property, adjusting the property line to the edge of the sidewalk. So if we are to develop this and get into civil engineering, once we establish where the sidewalk is going to be, we're going to adjust the property line and end up with a straight property line.
And then,
What you leave out is then dedicated to public right of way?
Typically, that's how we handle that. Because you might have a requirement for sidewalk, but the right of way doesn't allow you to provide a sidewalk. So you end up going into the owner's property to provide the sidewalk and then dedicate that back to the right of way.
Anything else, Mr. Chairman?
I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brown?
Yes, I'll be in opposition.
There's no one else to speak in favor, so Brown, you're the first in opposition.
I would be opposed to reducing that setback from 100 feet to 50 feet. I imagine there's good reasoning for the 100 foot. If it's an O&I use on the corridor where you're going to see more traffic, more activity like that, then I would think a 100 foot setback for safety reasons, if not other, would be good reasoning for it. And it would fit in with other O&I requirements that may happen later to have a 100 foot setback. So, are we saying that map is not to scale?
I didn't find a scale on this, so I couldn't.
I follow you. The reason I'm asking, what we're seeing there, the green area and the setback that's not even to scale. So it may not be accurate to say, oh yeah, that's what it's going to look like. I just bring that up. But I can see where the corridor O&I would require a longer setback. I can see the reasoning on that. So I would be in opposition to reducing it in half.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you.
Mr. Henderson?
Did you want to speak in opposition of the variance request to reduce the front setback?
Now, I've got another question about, when we talk about retail.
Okay.
Loading and unloading. That's a restaurant. Where's the entrance or ramp or unloading going to be?
Well, we might be able to address that out of the public hearing. Christian or Stacy Lawrence, would like to speak about the variance request? Mr. Bray? So we'll close the public hearing. Well, I should say, Ms. Sorrow, there were 6 minutes and 30 seconds remaining for rebuttal. Would you like to address anything regarding the variance?
If the board is not in agreement for that variance, and I know we have some opposition, I know Tom's not happy with that. Historically, part of the historic, and when you go through communities, you kind of have that streetscape, and that's the look that we're looking for, you know, something that's pleasing. And you know, if meet us, I mean, give us 75, you know, give us something that we can make it a little bit more likable, you know, attractive when you drive through the city. There are a lot of properties that are around here that are not aesthetically pleasing, if you will, and we're just trying to benefit the community. So I'll leave it up to you.
Go ahead.
Here's my concern. So you have your right of way. You're right on the corner of Anderson. We don't know what the traffic study is going to look like. But I know that there are a lot of cars with small children. There's a lot of school buses. There's, is it Lincoln Platinum?
Can you,
There's a lot of stuff back
Valerie,
there, so-
can you mash your button so we can hear you, please?
I'm sorry, I forgot about
about that. So I do have some safety concerns about limiting or reducing a setback there for visibility reasons. I don't know, you know, some of that may be addressed in a traffic study, but I hate it when I feel unsafe when I pull up to an intersection and you can't see around the buildings. You can't see very far. Like, anybody's ever tried to pull out of the Blue Willow in the afternoon when it's you know, traffic time, it's pretty hard to get done because you can't see. And I think it would be a detriment to have that same situation a little further down, especially in a main thoroughfare headed towards what is currently a primary school.
I'm going to respectfully disagree there. I mean, I'm looking at this, and I know it's not to scale, but if the building remains 56 feet off the front property line of this location, the intersection of Annie P is further west of that, so you're going to have your sight distance. Looking at it from a planning standpoint, of course, keeping my opinion out of it, looking at it solely from the ordinance, yeah, I can support the reduction. I like the idea of pushing the building out. I like the idea of even reducing the number of parking, 10 feet of green space. But, you know, that's not a discussion. I personally don't see a hardship to grant the variance, but also don't see a reason not to grant it. Because, you know, the uncertainty of where the right of way is a concern. So, but if that wasn't a concern for me, then I wouldn't have a problem with the reduction. That's just my opinion.
Okay.
I just don't like voting on something we don't know what it's going to be. You know, if they came in and said, okay, this is the property line, this is where the city's line is here, and this is how far back we can go, we could look at it then. But right now,
I mean, we could reduce it to 75 instead of
well, we still don't.
50. No, but that gives you an extra 25 feet no matter where it is. I mean, there's pros and cons, right?
Yeah.
Because if you have a lot of green space in the front, it could potentially be wasted space and space for, you know.
Yeah, I would rather see those buildings up closer to the road. Now, granted, it is a couple blocks from downtown. You can see how downtown's developed. I look at what other communities have done, like Monroe, that you're going into Monroe, those walls, apartments right there, retail sitting back. just.
They are right on the road.
Trying to find in our ordinance, you know, can we have a table, or do we in fact have to render a recommendation of approval condition denial? You know, like you, I would like to know where the right of way lies.
But we can only table it for one meeting.
I think it's too open. Yeah.
I think so. We have to make this.
The planning commission may decide not to make a recommendation, or may recommend approval, denial, deferral, withdrawal, or reduction of limit to the application is made with approval of any conditions. So, Laura, what are your thoughts?
I'm not sure, but you can't talk to Jack, somebody can live on, but I'm not right out in Stone, Houston, this is not the new building. The buildings are sitting back from it, but about those trees, the bushes, they grow.
That'd probably be technical. Yeah, I understand, yeah, your site distance is limited by the vegetation.
But they're not gonna drive like you know.
What's your thoughts?
I'd rather know myself exactly where it's going to be. That's me.
Can we table it until we find out exactly where the right of way is going to be?
I think you can, I think, you know, again, the city council follows our recommendations thus far. It still has to come back for the COA, for the corridor. The COA will look at the site setting and the building architecture.
Okay.
So that's my thought. Barbara, is that correct?
No, sir, it's pretty correct. Like I said, if this goes through with, if this is what the city wants to see this development, then yes, we have got to go through the sketch plan, preliminary, the final, everything with the traffic studies, got to have everything. And I just want to say for the record, we did bring this before you guys without having everything, because plans do cost a lot of money, and they want to make sure this is something that you want to see before they, you know, get everything pulled together. If we're going to allow this under this conditional use, if we would allow variances to squeeze as much on that property as you can, instead of, you know, pulling it back, making it closer to the road, and having the 1 and 2 bedroom condos above this retail. Like I said, if under, and I still want to state it, under the O and I, some things are already permitted uses, that if it wasn't on the highway corridor, she wouldn't have to cover anything if she didn't want to ask for these variances. So they're asking for the variances because they've got it laid out as close as they can get it without actually getting an engineer to draw these plans. And like I said, in our ordinances, it does state you are supposed to have all this together and done. But like I said, she's just trying to make sure this is proposed, if we're going to like it or not, if you're going to give it or not. Just trying to make sure if it's going to fit. There's a lot to be worked out on this plan because of knowing exactly where it's going to be. They've measured it as close as they can. I'm not sure how Amani came up with the footage with not knowing the right of way. So, and he might know that it's not on that drawing, so I'm not sure about that yet. But like I said, if you got the right of way, and then you've got to go back 50 feet according to O and I. But highway corridor says 100 feet.
Okay.
It just,
Well, I'll make a motion on the table.
I'll second that.
Motion by Mike at the table, second by Valerie.
Now, Monty is here to answer questions. He may know the answer to that, I don't suppose.
Does they know where the city line is, or is that just the property line still?
That's the property.
He might know, that's why I'm saying, I apologize for interrupting the motion. I'm just saying, it's not on the paper, so he may know what that is.
The site plan is based on a survey, so the property line is showing there, that's the property line. What you're saying is that the right of way is, does vary, it's not continue, it's not the same down the street. So wherever we're showing there, that is the property, and it's based on a natural survey.
But what's the footage, what is the right of way?
Do you know where the right of way is at?
It is vary, so wherever we're showing, that's the extent of the wherever is left over is wherever the right of way is. It's not a constant, it's not, you can't say 80 feet or anything like that, it's just, the right of way varies.
So you're
But
saying-
wherever we're showing there, that is how the property that he has available to develop.
So what you're saying,
Uh-huh.
if I understand you correctly, is that the right of way ends where the blue line is at.
Exactly. And what I was talking about, typically when you do the development, you might have certain requirements that cannot fit within the right of way. Then you're forced to put them in and then dedicate additional land to the right of way. But the way it is currently, that's how.
What I'm looking at right now is to the right up there at the top.
Well, yeah, that's
That line going to your right there is the city line.
Yes.
Okay, you've got your stuff labeled up there as trees and such that are.
Yeah,
on the property.
every now and then, when you have land, you don't leave it undeveloped, you don't leave it unfinished. Typically, you finish all the edge of the road.
So you're gonna do that for the city?
It is part of the city, but we normally develop, we develop all the way to the edge of the street. We don't leave anything undeveloped.
So they can just leave it disposed.
We still
Yes.
have to work with the tree board as well on this piece of property. One thing I did want to point out, the purpose of the 100 feet
Yes, sorry.
or
Keep coming.
I'm sorry. We're by no means, we have several things to work with, and one of them is the tree board. Yes, to answer your question, some of the trees will come down, but they'll have to be replaced, and the tree board will go over that with us. But one thing I wanted to point out to everybody is the reason for the 100 feet in the highway, in the historical and along the corridor is because in the historical, the 100 feet, they're allowed to park in front. We didn't put any parking in the front, and that's why we're asking for the variance to allow the sufficient parking. We can only have like the couple spaces here. That's why we opted for the community to turn this into golf cart parking specifically, because we can't have parking along the front like you normally would in the historical district. So that's another reason that we were asking for the 50-foot.
So I do have a question.
Okay?
So where the kind of the cut-in property line is there that designates the end of the right-of-way on the right side of the property,
Right here.
as drawn, there is currently 50 feet between that line and the building.
Actually, it's 56.8.
Okay, I thought that was on the left side.
Okay, on the right-hand side, that took away 7, so we're at 50, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
If you subtract 7 from that, yes, ma'am, it's at 50.
Okay. That's all I got.
Thank you.
Thank you both for clarifying that. So we have on the floor a motion on item to table this variance request to a later date, and then seconded by Valerie. Until we see a site plan, sorry, until we understand better what the right of way is. Seconded by Valerie. With the information given, Mike, you still want to move forward with your motion? Amend that motion.
We're working, and I understand that they don't want to spend a whole lot of money on something they might not do, but I got a feeling. I would like to see something other than what they've got there is for the city's right away. So as the motion maker, okay, you keep it that way? We'll take a vote on that motion. All those in favor of tabling the variance request
To reduce the front setback by 50% from 100 foot to 50 foot, please raise your hand.
all those that oppose to table? So that motion. Yes. So that motion, motion to the table passed 4-1 with myself opposed. Next item is a variance request to reduce the buffer from 75 foot to 60 foot into the property. Barbara, would you like to introduce this for us, please?
Yes, sir. This is, variance request is to reduce the buffer, and the buffer is between the O&I property and the next door neighbor's property that is zoned R25 residential. The buffer requirement between those two zonings are 75 feet. They would like to reduce that down to 60 feet on the north end of the property. Under the section 907, state buffer zones are required along the side and rear yard where an office, institutional, business, or manufacturing use abuts a residential district where multifamily use butts single-family residential. The ordinance mandates there be a 75-foot buffer next to residential structure. The buffer can be reduced by 10 feet if a 6-foot fence is added. As stated in section 1204, location and width of the traditional buffers. And traditional buffers widths may be reduced by 50% or 10 feet, whichever is less, by the addition of a solid opaque fence or wall at least 6 feet in height landscape. Staff recommends Planning Commission consider approval of the variance request as long as it has the buffer requirement of the either the opaque fence or either the wall at least 6 feet in height of evergreens or landscaping.
Any questions or comments? Ms. Sarver, would you like to come? Yes. Explain this variance request to me?
Yes, sir. Also wanted real quick just point out, in that when we first came before y'all, the survey was part of that, and y'all have seen that before. And but that wasn't what y'all wanted. Y'all wanted this. So we went back to that. So I just wanted to let y'all know that. So as far as the variance, right here, I guess we're adjacent to the Criswells, is it?
Lawrence's.
Yeah, Lawrence's, okay. Yeah, right here. So, and we want to be good neighbors. We are asking just for the 15-foot variance along that side, and so we'll just leave it up to y'all.
That's heavily vegetated currently.
It is. It's very heavily vegetated currently, but we will be once again putting the buffer along there as requested if we reduce that variance.
I know up by the road, there's a very thick wall.
There is bamboo.
Bamboo.
Mhm.
Does that extend down the entire length of the property?
I don't think it's the entire property.
It's
It's a good bit of
almost
it.
back, yeah. It's
Yeah.
pretty close to my
Yeah.
property line.
Yeah. Personally, I don't like the bamboo,
Well, it's
but
an invasive species, yes, but it's a
Yeah.
heck of a wall.
yeah,
I think it's grown out into the road a few times.
yeah. Well, we can leave it up.
Um,
No problem with that. So maybe we can save some money.
We've got 9 minutes remaining. All right, we'll open up the public hearing for those that would like to speak in favor of the variance request to reduce the side yard setback. Ms. Brown?
I'll be in opposition this time.
Well, seeing no one else signed up to speak for this request, Ms. Brown, opposition.
I realize there's only a 15-foot difference, and I'm just saying in general, when a higher density development is done next to a residential single family, that buffer is all they've got between them and the higher density. So it kind of plays an important role when you've got a higher density next to a single family residential. So maybe there's some room in there to be other than 75, but in general, I would support the 75-foot buffer because of that, unless something can be done for sure that would compensate for doing it less than 75 feet. Okay?
Thank you. Mr. Henderson? Okay. Mr. and Mrs. Lawrence?
Again, we're the Lawrences, Christian and Stacy at 662 North Cherokee on the north end of this. And, you know, we laugh about the bamboo, but it is a great divider. And, you know, I would save the fence and leave the bamboo because really 75 feet of it, it creates a great barrier. And once you reduce that, some of that bamboo has died through the middle from there's a drainage area there. And it's killed off some of it. So once they take that back, it's going to thin out and then open up to us. And a 6-foot fence really between the two properties isn't going to do anything. It's not hiding anything. You know, I think the vegetation is better. And, you know, if they put a wall on their side to contain it for them, then that's something they need to look at. But for our side, we maintain it. And, but if you take out 15 feet of it back to where it starts deadening, then you'll be able to see through and, you know, on our property, and just noise reduction. I mean, it is a good thing to have. And it does stretch back to this corner. So it is thick and goes all the way down. So it is a good barrier, but if you reduce it and kill it off, then,
Yeah.
you know, that's a, go ahead.
What I'd like to say also, in addition to that, is they're talking about possibly a 6-foot fence. Well, our house is 2 stories, and our bedroom actually sits on that end of the property. It sits right about here, or right about here on the property. And so if you take down even part of that vegetation, as my husband mentioned, the more you take down, the more it does kill off. And so we will lose all that bamboo, which there are days I'd like for it to be gone, but not if this is going to be what I'm going to have to listen to every night. And 6 foot is going to be nothing. I'll be able to see into every bedroom, into every window, into every office building, whatever is on this.
Or just the
end of
outdoor
building.
lighting.
Just the outdoor lighting. We already have to deal with the lighting back here in the industrial area. It shines right into the back side of our house, into all the bedrooms, into our bedroom, and there's no way you can reduce that if you take away this buffer and kill that bamboo off. The 6-foot fence would be a complete waste because it would do nothing for us. So this, I would be completely opposed to the 75, reducing this to 60 foot, because that 6-foot fence is going to do nothing.
Okay.
And it will kill the bamboo off.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Bray? Oh, thank you. At this time, we'll conclude the public hearing. Ms. Sorrow, you do have 9.5 minutes. And I'm sure there might be some questions.
Yeah, so, you know, once again, we were kind of trying to follow along what was best for the property. The bamboo is on our property, if I'm not mistaken. I still want them to understand that based on design, what the engineers upon, the bamboo still may come down according to what the engineers determine and once the city engineer reviews it and stuff like that. And then, Barbara, is it correct that if we do not get the variance, then we're only obligated for the buffer if we get the variance, correct?
You need to take that again, so I
Okay.
know what you're asking.
Do we have to put a fence up if you don't give us the variance? No.
No, you just
No.
gotta have the traditional buffer of the footage.
Which would be the traditional in which we could plant some bushes or trees or
Vegetation or
whatever.
stuff.
And we still have to remove okay. All right.
If you keep the 75 foot, yes, the
Correct.
traditional. Yeah.
Correct. Okay, thank you.
You mentioned earlier the parking for the residents would be in that lower right-hand corner shown there, and it's behind a gate. I don't want to assume anything, but that parking area would be completely enclosed by a wall or a fence of some type?
We haven't determined that yet. Our point was to have that gated,
Yes, ma'am.
have this area gated here, and have the buffer, and we were actually encouraged to request for the buffer. But like I said, if we don't do the buffer, I'm not, this vegetation may come down anyway. It depends on the site development, and that's not really a decision for myself. So that's a decision for the professionals.
So what I was trying to understand is if you're going to encapsulate that whole parking area,
And that side that's along the vegetative buffer is going to be an enclosure of some type, whether it's a brick wall, to protect the residents' cars, whether it's a privacy fence,
that there provides some barrier between the parking area and the adjacent residential property.
that's all I was asking.
What we were gonna do is put up a nice fence. I don't think the lighting would still be above the bamboo, but we would still, we would put up a fence with that variance. We would be required to, plus trees, and make it.
And with your building design, something that you could look at so that your lighting, it doesn't spill over onto adjacent properties.
Correct.
Is all down lighting.
They have down lighting now that
So-
only comes on at certain times, and it
Yeah.
doesn't
Wall packs.
last.
and-
It's
yeah.
not like it used to be.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
There are ways to address the lighting
Yes.
spillover, and concerns of noise, odor.
generating. Yeah, the vegetation probably works better, and I'm sure you would like to try to save as much as you can.
Certainly.
Okay,
Yes. Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thoughts, questions, concerns, those in vegetative buffer? So essentially, Barbara, correct me if I'm wrong, whether or not the buffer variance is granted, they could go in there, grade the entire thing for site development, come back and plant
75.
foot off the property line, plant a row of Leland cypress, and be done with their buffer, so to speak, right?
That's correct.
So it's not I guess what we could do is if we were to consider a buffer reduction, condition it to an undisturbed buffer.
You could, and like I said, they've got to go to the tree board to do the landscape plan. That will have to be addressed with this project, and they'll have to do, like I said, they've got the trees planted and the evergreens and things like that, but they will have to have a detailed landscape plan.
Yeah.
So if they go in and clear it, they've got to plant it back, and they've got a certain canopy coverage they have to meet. It doesn't all have to be in the buffer, but they do have to have, a buffer between residential and O&I.
I would just hate to see the property, in order for development purposes, get cleared up to adjacent property, and then to recompensate, it's just a single row of evergreen, because that defeats the purpose of the buffer.
Yeah, it does. It does.
So I have a question. Ordinance mandates a 75-foot buffer, or it can be reduced by 10 feet or 50%, whichever is less.
Yeah, so 10 feet is less.
Right, but they're asking for 15.
So we can only by ordinance give them 10.
Okay. We just hadn't said that out loud yet, so. Sorry.
No, that's great. But it's,
Good catch.
If that's something that anybody's considered, making that motion, to reduce it by 10 feet for the ordinance, within the ordinance, I should say. Think about also requiring percentage of revegetation, or requiring that it's undisturbed, because otherwise it would defeat the purpose.
Right. But they would still have to, even if we reduce it, they still have to put up a fence.
No.
Whichever's less by the addition of a solid opaque fence or wall at least 6 feet
But
up.
I think they did the plantings in lieu of a fence or wall, is that right?
That's right. It did.
Oh, it doesn't say that.
I'm sorry. It does.
I would think vegetative planting.
We could just leave it at 75 feet and of undisturbed buffer.
Make a recommendation to the highway commissioner.
Any other thoughts?
Let's ignore anything. Jay?
Okay, I'm going to make the motion.
What is your motion?
I'm going to motion that we leave the 75 feet of undisturbed buffer and deny the motion. Recommend deny.
A motion to recommend to deny the variance request and
Leave the
75-foot buffer
Undisturbed.
I second that.
So we got a second. Okay. All those in favor, signify by raising your hand. At this time, we have no other public hearings. We don't have any old business. Barbara, do we have any new business that's not listed on the agenda that's coming before us at a later date?
I do have one item for new business that I need to discuss. I've called around and I think I've got everybody's yes or no. We need to bring the updated zoning map to the planning commission and look and see what we've, corrected, that we've rezoned over the years. My question is, if we come in December, I don't have any other applications but that. I've gotten several no's that can't make it on December the 27th. So then I need to have direction from the commission if we're going to try to have a meeting. Jay was the only one I didn't have an answer, yes or no. No? Okay, well then I've got 4 no's and I've only got 3 yeses, so
That's a tough meeting to have right after Christmas.
it is. So we're gonna have to push that out until January. I do want everyone to know that zoning map, it's on our website. And that one has not been updated since 2017. So we've got quite a few rezones that we've done and we want to get that up as soon as we can. So it'll be January and then it'll go to mayor and council in February. Okay?
No other business. Motion to read it. Motion is second. All those in favor, raise your hand. Meeting adjourned. Thanks.